him go on trial. There was a short reprieve when Maxwell was actually convicted, but now that's being politicized. Now we have Donald Trump calling it a hoax, and now we have the idea that none of these survivors have been contacted to actually release the grand jury testimony, which, by the way, is illegal if they are not contacted to do so. And then you have Trump saying that he didn't want to hurt people. So, but the implication was not that he was talking about survivors with releasing the information. It was that maybe he would be hurting some of his friends in high places. I say all that to say that it sounds negative. However, we are in this moment today because we believe these survivors. In 2025, we live in a different cultural environment. We're not demanding that they come forward to tell their stories because we're questioning the validity of it. No, we believe them. The American public is demanding the accountability of the perpetrators. So we have both things working at the same time. We have the White House not paying attention to the survivors, and that's a negative. But we have the American public demanding information. 86% of the American public wants information. And that is a credit to the courage of these survivors for coming forward and telling their stories.
That's across the political spectrum. You know, survivors are used to being forgotten. Right, and that as a part of our system. These survivors, as you said, almost everyone is calling for some kind of justice for them. Justice looks different for every survivor. So talk a little bit about, as you know, these women who were girls when they were hurt and raped. What justice looks like for them? What is it? What are the things that, for the ones that you've talked, because I'm sure you've been in touch with them, we've had at least one on our show. What do they tell you about what justice looks like for them?
Well, first of all, it's being believed, right? When I came forward 9 years ago at Fox News, I thought I was all by myself. And I wanted vindication that I was telling the truth. And then thousands of people started reaching out to me, and I realized, oh my gosh, we all want the same thing, right? You just want to be believed. We're now a lot more along in progress in doing so. But the other thing is that they want to be able to own their own voices. And this is what I fight against now, are things like NDAs, because a lot of these women signed NDAs as young girls before they were actually recruited to come and work, right? They had no idea they were signing away what was eventually going to happen to them. And this happens all the time to regular people in the workplace as well. And then it happens and they realize they don't own their own voice. And I would say that of the thousands of people I've talked to, they say, when can I tell my story? When can I own my own voice? And if they've signed something like that, I unfortunately have to say never. I mean, the unbelievable fact is that I don't own my own story. And so I can't even tell you the details. Luckily, I can talk about this and help other people. But that's something that all survivors want, is to own their own story.
You know, multiple times President Trump has been asked the question, would you pardon Ghislaine Maxwell? Because she obviously wants a pardon. And he never categorically says no.
I know.
That this is, it's still hanging out there. So what do you...
I can do it.
Right. You know, I haven't thought about it, but I mean, I can do it. What do you make of the fact that President Trump still refuses to categorically rule out a pardon for a convicted sex trafficker, sex assaulter?
I think that that is the biggest slap in the face to the survivors of everything else that I listed. Because that is, to your point earlier, normalizing the fact that it doesn't matter what she did. The idea that that would even be on the table for consideration, that is going to cross all party lines. There will be an insurrection if that happens. It won't just be Democrats. It won't just be, it'll be MAGA. It'll be independents. It will be everybody, because we are at a place in the society right now where we know that child sex trafficking is a crime and that you should not be granted clemency or any release for doing that to young women.
He did release her from, well, I should say Ghislaine Maxwell was released from this maximum security prison to a Club Fed.
And that is very worrisome to me, because while Congress is on recess and they can't call these hearings and have these people come testify, and by the way, they should call the survivors to come and testify for those as well. But I'm worried that another shoe may drop here, where maybe from a political point of view, they will grant her a pardon before any of the rest of that can happen. But if I think the American public would rise up against that, because we are at a different place in 2025 than we were even just 9-10 years ago.
Lawyers for the Epstein survivors wrote a letter to the judge overseeing the possible unsealing of the jury material in Maxwell's case on this possible pardon. I'm going to read from this a little bit. Several victims have already died by suicide, drug overdose, or under tragic circumstances tied directly to the trauma caused by Epstein and Maxwell. The psychological toll of this abuse is ongoing. A pardon issued in silence or secrecy would reignite deep trauma, destabilize the already fragile healing process of many survivors, and could result in further irreparable harm, including loss of life. It would suggest to victims everywhere that powerful predators are once again above the law. That last line there, it would suggest to victims everywhere that powerful predators are once again above the law. Do you see it that way?
Of course. Yeah. And I would hope that there would be at least one advisor to President Trump that would be telling him what a grave error this would be.
Also touches some of the most powerful people across the political spectrum and the business world, and feeds exactly into how the MAGA base was born, feeling like there was a two-tier justice system. Now, Mark, the Justice Department is considering releasing this audio of the meeting between Todd Blanche and Ghislaine Maxwell. But even if they do, why would we believe it? Right? Let's say the audio is from 10 minutes of their speaking. Maybe they spoke for 6 hours. What do we know?
That's obviously correct. The audio could also be doctored, not to sound conspiratorial, but there's certainly been a whiff of conspiracy about this whole thing. And the excerpts that are released to the public, if they are released, are likely to be the most exonerating excerpts that we heard in the entire exchange. There's a lot that we're not going to hear that could be damning. And, you know, beyond that, we all know that Ghislaine Maxwell had every incentive to say what Donald Trump and his administration want to hear. It is very, very clear at this stage that in exchange for her speaking to Todd Blanche, she was moved to a very, very low security prison, essentially an arts and crafts camp, as Alex says, that she would not normally qualify for. I mean, the government had to essentially break its own rules in order to move this woman to the lowest security prison where she would get the best kind of treatment. And, you know, I'm sure she recognized that if she wanted this gift from the government, she needed to give them something in exchange. So this is not trustworthy testimony. Even if there's nothing particularly interesting in it, we need to recognize that she has every motivation to say what she thinks Trump wants to hear, and that if she did say something Trump wants to hear, that's not going to get released to the American public.
Jillian, how worried should we be about that? Right? Maxwell, a convicted sex trafficker, gets transferred to a minimum security prison camp, and nobody has given us even a shred of an explanation why that happened.
Well, what is amazing about the whole Epstein story is that 6 months ago, it was a riddle wrapped in a conundrum, wrapped in a mystery, or whatever that tagline is. And nothing really made sense about it. We still don't know how a school teacher ended up being worth these billions, why powerful people in Manhattan and elsewhere were paying him all this money. There is so much we just don't know yet. And what's really fascinating is that actually we're now in a position where there are even more mysteries than there were before. So there's even more question marks and even more uncertainty. And that's astonishing, because normally the whole point about investigation is to get answers and to clear up some of the mysteries. Instead, we're just left, as shown by this discussion, with even more questions.
David, you know who can answer a lot of these important questions? Alex Acosta, the former U.S. attorney in Florida who approved the so-called sweetheart deal to not prosecute Epstein 20 years ago. The House Oversight Committee issued subpoenas to a multitude of top former DOJ officials and the Clintons, but not Acosta. Why not?
Because there's a cover-up in place. I mean, clearly. That doesn't mean that the president himself should be adjudicated as guilty of a crime, but clearly we know from reporting that Pam Bondi apparently has acknowledged to Donald Trump that he is in the files. We know through a lot of photos and other information that Donald Trump had a strong relationship. We know Donald Trump's really egregious, disgusting comments about Jeffrey Epstein liking young women. And this is a political issue, notwithstanding a criminal issue, that is so easily understandable. I mean, Ghislaine Maxwell, on behalf of Jeffrey Epstein and whomever else was involved, recruited young women to be raped. And there's a question about who was involved in the sexual offenses against these young women. And we know that Donald Trump's name is at least somewhere in this universe, again, not knowing whether or not he would be guilty of a crime or not. And now Donald Trump himself as president is essentially in charge of the files. And Alex is exactly right. This notion of the grand jury testimony is a complete distraction and a grade school tactic of the Department of Justice. First of all, I don't think the grand jury testimony should be released. It is private for a reason. But there are boxes and boxes and boxes of evidence and other information that if Donald Trump's administration, a president who now controls his own Department of Justice in a way that few presidents ever have, even including Richard Nixon, they could release information about this case, but they are not because there's a cover-up in place. And the reason that the suspicions are so great is because Donald Trump's words and behaviors himself, and because of Pam Bondi's words herself. And so Donald Trump's base is the one that is holding him accountable. Look, this is just delay, delay, delay as long as the White House can, but it stinks, and people know it stinks, and it is a very understandable, grievous crime at the heart of this.
What we're seeing here fundamentally is just the basic fact. Why should we trust Ghislaine Maxwell? Right? Like why should we? This is a person who has been charged with lying under oath. She hasn't been convicted of that yet. But in addition to the much more serious charges she was convicted of and jailed for, imprisoned for, there were arguments that during the course of testimony she gave, she wasn't honest. And so she is a person with a lack of credibility. And because of that, you have to ask, if she's all of a sudden going to bail Trump out, why should we believe her? One, again, this person isn't historically known for their credibility in official testimony, right? But also, she has a motivation, a stone-cold motivation to either lie and or omit information to benefit Trump. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean she's doing it. I don't have the proof. But what I do know is, if she helps Trump out, that's the one man that can, one, either pardon her, release her from prison, like he's already done. At least he says he didn't do it, but we know he probably did it. Like he's already done, move her to a nicer prison. Like he has the ability to make her life easier or harder, basically on a whim. And so she has motivation to protect him and motivation to not tell the truth about him if that truth is devastating. And so this is one of the reasons we need the actual evidence, the actual documents to be public, because they might not say everything. There may be things in those documents that don't get us to the full story, right? Like ultimately there are things in Maxwell's head that we might never know. But we can't trust her, but we can trust the millions and millions of pieces of paper and documents and whatnot to nail not just her, but maybe others as well.